Welcome to HR on the Rocks, a podcast for professionals that takes you behind the closed door.
Hey, welcome back to HR on the Rocks, episode
Yes, ma'am.
3. And
Yes, ma'am.
so today we are going to be diving into the evolution of recruiting, and going over how recruiting has changed over the past decade or so.
It or so means 2 decades, Melanie. It's
Yeah,
okay. You can actually, it's okay.
however
Full
many decades. We don't have to be exact. But I thought, who better to start with when talking about the history of how recruiting, what it looked like
Ouch.
back in
I hope you're going to Justin. Yeah.
Justin. Justin,
Cheers,
No,
Justin.
we have the same amount of hair, and this is what I get. I mean, come on. It's unbelievable.
It's true.
Yeah.
So, I really will date myself. File cabinets and fax machines. There it is. That's how it
Done. Episode complete. The history.
That's how it was. It was very little email interaction. Hardly any. I mean, it really was emails and fax machines. Fax machines, file cabinets, and it was crazy. And it was everything. There was no cloud. There was nothing. Especially early on in, the late 90s. And then everything kind of, gradually changed. And, one of the other processes that really changed was, since I really started out in the medical field doing recruiting for nurses, being able to walk into a hospital today compared to early 2000, it's completely.
Yeah, you couldn't. I mean, you can't even do that today. Really. I mean,
No,
you can, but like
it's gatekeepers. It's
for sure.
And if you have a good relationship, maybe you can walk through, go past if people have seen you a bunch. But no, for the most part, it's gatekeeper upon gatekeeper, and you better have some sort of pass or badge to even walk in there. You didn't need any of that. Oh, you just wanted to walk through the ER and go check on some ER nurses on a, or ICU, go check on some and take, your little goodies, whether that's donuts or kolaches, which once again, that's dating myself as well, because that's rarely done, because you pretty much need to have an entire Starbucks catering, supply for everybody there. It's really interesting how all of that has really changed. So really getting in there, being able to do face-to-face, being able to really communicate with people, and and then just gradually it just kind of more aligned in technology immediately.
Yeah, so a lot of FaceTime, it sounds like, for you, in those early days of Justin the recruiter.
It was lots of FaceTime. That's really, it was not that it's not word of mouth now, because that is one of the best ways to recruit, and get business. But hey, at the end of it, nothing like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
In Justin's case, the FaceTime, I mean, it's probably better that it's more phone now, right?
Ooh.
Shots fired, round one.
Fired round one, and it's off. Cheers to me.
The pain a little bit there.
That's right.
It's okay.
Numb it up.
Fine.
Numb it up.
That's completely okay.
I always tell everybody that I have a face for radio for sure. Sounds like you were about to ask me.
Yeah. So what about you, Jake? I mean, tools of the trade. Maybe not quite as long ago, or maybe so. If you're basing it off how much you have,
it goes down to 20, 10. It goes a half by half. Yeah. It's like a 20, a 10, and a 5.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that has changed is the level of connection. From my perspective, I think when you look back at those initial conversations that I was having a decade ago and talking to a candidate, you really had to make sure that you got to know them a lot. You really had to ensure that you were able to market them in an appropriate way. And I think now it seems like technology has made everything a lot easier to get done, which is great, right? It's great to be able to do a video interview and leverage technology. But it is a little harder to be connected in a way that's meaningful. And so, I mean, for example, I used to, have to pick up the phone and really talk to these individuals and get to know, like, so if I'm talking to a potential business, it's, hey, what is it you're looking for in a candidate? Um, and then on the flip side of it, it's, hey, what are you really looking for in a job, your career, as opposed to just it feels like very transactional today. And that feels like
Yeah.
everything. And I always, it's funny because I look back and talk to my kids now, and the idea is like McDonald's essentially ruined everything, fast food. And now it's, if you have to wait in line for more than, a minute or two, people are getting upset. And it's kind of interesting because like COVID showed us that, because service wasn't the same after COVID. Everything kind of slowed down again because you don't have as many service workers out there, and people couldn't handle that. They had to figure out how to deal with those that frustration level. So it's been interesting. I'm kind of all over the board there. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah.
things have definitely changed a lot.
It's okay. I'm drinking now. That's
It's
fine.
also kind of like FaceTime for Justin was like phone time for you, I guess. Is there kind of an original?
It was a lot of fun time.
And it's funny, like the FaceTime with Justin. So I remember more of like from a candidate view in my first experience in the recruiting world was I'm right out of college and I was a lit major, and I didn't have any experience. And I remember asking my parents, like, how did you get your first
Did
job?
you say
What
a
did
lit
you do?
major?
Yes, literature.
Okay.
Like
HR,
read.
lit,
So
makes
you're-
sense to me.
So
Yeah.
you were looking to make a lot of money.
I was going for something that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed reading and I enjoyed writing. And in my 20-year-old brain, I thought that'll lead to something that pays well, or that maybe it's more important
But it
that
led to
I don't
these two
know.
guys. It led to these two guys, and you're just like, oh
Yeah,
god, yeah.
life choices. But yeah, my parents
Went
had said,
sideways somewhere.
so I don't know what happened. But my parents had said, hey, just get, print out your resume and, you take it around and you talk to people and you go to companies and hand it out. And so that's what I did. I got in the car with my dad and I had my folder of resumes that had, my name was in like 40 font, and then like, customer service and whatever else is below it. And we drove to downtown Dallas and we parked and we just went like, or I say we, he like would stay in the car and I would walk in and, try to get past the security desk. And I didn't usually get that far. I got a lot of rejection
Sprinting
before
down a hallway.
I didn't even like make it to the employer. They're like, nope. But on occasion, like I would get a little farther and I would, hey, looking to hire anybody? And I handed out probably a dozen resumes or so that people would actually take it and probably crumpled it up and threw it away.
Yes,
But it
that's what
wasn't.
most HR people do when someone comes in and drops off a resume.
Yeah, I didn't wait till I had left, the building before they did that. I just assumed that's what happened.
Straight to the shredder.
But it wasn't until I was talking with a girl I'd gone to high school with, and she was also a lit major, and she was working at a law firm, and they had an opening, and she was able to get me an interview. They had an open position. She was able to get me in, and I went in, and I'm excited because I was like, oh yeah, I'll just talk to someone, and I'll get hired. And I go in, and I start talking, and the guy just glazes over less than a minute in, and I'm like, oh, I'm blowing it. Whatever, I guess it's good practice. And
looks like Justin right about now.
Justin's familiar with him. He glazes over a lot.
All right, I couldn't resist, Melanie. You left that one. That was low hanging fruit.
Yeah. But then I went on Career Builder. I think it was Career Builder, and I found another law office that was hiring, and I got a call. I applied. I got a call a couple days later from the office manager who recognized I had a 903 number, and she was like, oh, you're from East Texas. And so long story short, that opened the door for me, and they ended up hiring me. And
It's the little things sometimes, right?
yeah, and
That you
I'm like,
never
well,
think
all
of.
of the things, like I can do like A, B, C, D, but I'm from East Texas, and someone from East Texas, and you have fond memories there, and that was the hook. And this was, a little over 10 years ago that this happened. But
Couple
for
years.
me, it was like, it was the tool that I used ultimately that got me there was the forum of like Career Builder and having that platform where I could go and find a job. And connected also with like, um, you know, that like the person that I didn't know, but she knew where I was from. So that's definitely changed. Technology has definitely been one of those things that over the past decade or two uh, has really changed
Yeah,
what
just a
recruiting looks
slight
like,
bit.
just
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you would have told me 20 years ago I could use this, or we could do this, like
yeah.
effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was starting to kind of see that as I was kind of finishing at that staff level recruiting role where I was and really getting into management of HR. I was definitely starting to do interviews that were video, but like even then it was like hit or miss. Half the time they didn't have a good connection or I didn't. They would be spotty and inevitably I'd end up back on the phone with them, just like it always had been up to that point, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
It's the way it is.
So I'm curious how, I mean, that was kind of how I got my foot in the door, my first experience. But what about like Jake or Justin? Any tools that were relevant back in the day that would be totally different today?
I'll get that one. I'll let the younger generation go.
The younger generation. That's you.
Yeah. So my journey was a little different in the sense that, I'd gone to West Point and then did that 5 years required in the military. And so that was all kind of like pre-programmed post-college for me. Like there was no, all I had to figure out really was like what branch of service I wanted to go to. But the point is, so fast forward when I got out of the service, one of the things that is still in essence the same today, but still, a little different. I think at least from my perspective now, is staffing and recruiting agencies. So I had reached out to an agency that their specialty was transitioning veterans into corporate jobs, and I talked about that a little bit in the last episode. Um, and I think that like when you compare that to now, had I had the tools at my disposal now that I did then, I don't know that I would have necessarily needed that because the technology that you could, at least in my mind, I would have thought like, sure, I can just jump on LinkedIn or Career Builder like you did, or Monster, pick your job board out there, as opposed to like once upon a time, my first job, like I saw it in the newspaper, it was in the want ads, and I mean that was the thing, right? That really was a real thing, which is wild to think about. And they're still kind of there. There are still people that get the newspaper, and there's still a classified section, but how many people are getting a job that way, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
few and far between.
Well, think about this. My dad used a true headhunter service for one of his
Hmm.
first
Mhm.
jobs, and where they actually paid, the company didn't pay. You
That's right.
paid
Yeah.
someone to
You,
go
the
find you,
individual, paid.
and they put it on a. I'll never forget this because they they and some of that kind of still exists, but not like it. That's the way it was, and it was. They put it on a payment plan, and it would come out of like his paycheck somehow. Like they paid like
Wow.
I think it was like $10 a month for like 2 years in
So once they found him the job,
1975.
like that new company they would just yank back 10 every time.
It was something like that, or they had to literally pay the agency, but it was $10 a month, 10 or
Mhm.
15.
That's
You know
wild.
what? I'm gonna find that out for the next. You know what?
That's your homework
I
assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would text him right now, but I know where they are, and they're not gonna answer it, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and with like the integration of technology and how recruiting is done now, we're looking at applicant tracking systems, even in recent years, artificial intelligence, automation of tasks. And that's something that that wasn't really utilized 10, especially 20 years ago. But now, it streamlines things, and it maybe or maybe does not make things more efficient. And so I don't
It's your
know if
security. It's your security guard now, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
Yeah.
mean, and that's something I know we're going to get into in later episodes, stuff that we really want to talk about that, you know, I know is a great interest to the two of you. And it's really, y'all have force fed it down my throat because we know how much I love technology. Um, hey,
we can get you a fax
I
machine.
synced up these stupid things
Yeah, you got
today.
the earbuds in. Yeah, the
I got them
AirPods.
in. I did it on my own. I didn't need my 10-year-old to do it. So, hey, that is what it
Golf
is.
clap.
Now, truth be told, I did watch her yesterday, set up hers to give to me. So,
He's like the gorilla at the zoo. He's got to watch it first, and then he gets in there.
yes, yes. But that's, yeah. I, I don't even know where I was.
Yeah.
And I was
So
actually having fun. I started
yeah,
thinking to myself, I was like,
systems,
oh,
AI,
but that
Well,
was your original security and gatekeeper,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it
yeah,
is now. And unfortunately, like I was saying, that's something we'll get into. It bounces a lot of candidates who actually are good. And that's what we'll get into, some really tailor-made ways to make your resume do certain things. We'll get into all that. But that's your new gatekeeper.
yeah,
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 and I think I think kind of along those lines, as I look at the landscape of technology, it's creating this really interesting. It's a really interesting place that we're at in the course of the evolution of recruiting from my perspective, because like you've got a lot of baby boomers that are still in the workforce that really had a hard time adopting, but they're mostly leaving the executive, or they're at the executive level. Gen Xers are kind of taking over at the executive level, some millennials, depending on, the kind of company. But the reality is like it, a lot of companies have executives that are having a harder time adopting some of these tools. But on the same token, like the staff level employee that's actually executing going through the process of looking through all the resumes and comparing it to the job description and trying to figure out like, okay, Bobby, Sally, and Susie match this job. Tommy, Johnny, and Jimmy don't. And so, as they go through that process, like they're filtering those or pushing those folks forward in the ATS, and then the hiring manager is like, hey, just email those to me. Like I don't really want to I don't want to go click that button in there. I'm not interested in learning that. It's this weird system that, too much technology for them. And so it's interesting that like initially when I started in recruiting, people were still kind of faxing resumes, but they were starting to attach resumes to email. But email has become such an important aspect of it that like you fast forward to now, it turns into one of those things where the connection and having that going around the gatekeeper to finding someone that's in the building is more important.
yeah,
And so that really turns into, I think, going back to the connection thing that I talked about earlier. That's one of those things that like connection is king from my perspective when it comes to finding a new job. And that's why like I'll tout an employee referral program for a business all day, every day. Like that is their most valuable tool to
mhm,
recruiting from my perspective. But anyway,
yeah,
We
sorry.
just
That
had more success with that in the last couple places where we've been together. We've seen it. I mean,
yeah,
when you actually have someone who can really,
mm,
once again, that's a whole nother,
yeah, yeah.
mhm.
that's episode what, 12,
Yes,
13, 14?
episode 12.
It's down the road.
But yeah,
I
and it's
mean,
interesting that you say that because one of the things that has changed in the recruiting world, is a focus on employer branding. Um, and you bring up the employee referral program, but it's like if you want to know about a company and maybe you don't know anybody, you can go on Glassdoor or Indeed or somewhere, and like how are they rated? And then, how how much can you trust that rating? You know, is it like, I guess the same as a restaurant. There's some people that had a bad night or a bad server or whatever, and they just like go off on a rant. Because I feel like there's
Well,
like
and
the
some of
one
it, and
star and the
some of it's
5 star and
legit.
nothing in
Sure.
between.
And some
Yeah.
of it's, and that's where we come in, right? In HR and recruit. I mean, some of it's legit, and sometimes you have to get past.
Hmm.
That can be a hurdle. I
Yeah.
mean, I know I've gotten it on the corporate side. Well, I've heard y'all don't pay as much. I've read reviews about your company, and you don't do that. Okay, well, here's why we don't, and or this is why, But it's a hurdle, sure, and you really have to get past the disgruntled employee. I mean, you
Yeah.
really do. I know Jake has had to fight that more than anybody.
Yeah, it's so I think for sure along those lines, I think a disgruntled employee can certainly do a lot of damage. That said, I really do believe that so it's great that there's more transparency like Glassdoor, like Yelp. Um, Most people reading that, they take it for what it's worth, to your point earlier, Justin. I think the more transparency we can create, the better off we are, I think, for everybody, right? But along the same lines, like you have to have that's why, so doubling right back to that employee referral program, like if you have someone that's in the organization, that individual is so much more likely to stay because they have a real picture of someone that they trust. So like Melanie, let's say I refer you to company XYZ, and me, let's pretend you trust me, maybe not.
Hmm. We'll
But you
pretend.
trust me. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll pretend for now. But
After
again,
this
like,
last year and a half, Melanie, I don't know.
so so but I can give you a better sense of like whatever that Glassdoor thing says, or whatever that Yelp thing says, or whatever the case is there.
Hmm.
And so I think that it is important to get better at transparency. But I think and Justin, this goes back to kind of what you were saying, like the total employee value proposition, because yeah, that company may be lower on base salary, but like if they're still one of the top Fortune 100 top companies to work for, they can get away with that, right? That
Sure, they can.
there's a trade-off there that like you're getting a great culture. Yeah, we're a faith-based nonprofit. So like Texas Health Resources, I worked for them years ago, and they're still a great company, but they weren't as strong on compensation, at least on base compensation. Total compensation, when you look at the whole picture with benefits and bonus and all that stuff, they were competitive, but there's a nearsightedness sometimes when it comes to
Very
that
nearsighted.
that compensation picture. So anyway,
Like Melanie nearsightedness. Complete. Yes.
Mr. Magoo. Oh
I've fixed
gosh,
that problem.
some of our audience might not even get that reference to Mr. Magoo. Oh,
Yeah.
No,
Well,
no.
I
Funny thing is,
apologize. Sorry.
I barely, and I'm older than you. That's weird. Like I
uh,
didn't even.
Yeah, I always watch the old school cartoons. I always like those better.
I've heard of him, but I
Fair
never
enough.
actually watched the cartoon. I just
Well,
know,
we
I
have
know
homework
of,
projects. I'm texting my
yes.
dad over how much he had to pay for a headhunter. You have to watch Mr. McGee.
Oh, I don't
There
even
you
know.
go.
They may be streaming somewhere. I don't know. But yeah,
No doubt.
I think that pretty much kind of wraps us up for today. As far as I mean, we could talk for a lot longer on what's changed in recruiting from back
Sure.
in Justin's day to fast forward to 2024.
Once again, Melanie. Once again.
How
She's
great that
she's
was.
really making winning friends and influencing people today. And that's a book title for those of you who haven't
Yeah,
read that one.
real
It's a
quick.
it's a good old school
She's
book.
make, she's making an impact.
That's right.
Well done, Justin.
So, thank you.
But yeah, so thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to diving into some more recruiting and other HR topics with you guys.
And I think
We'll see you.
one last
All
toast.
right,
Yeah,
one
one
last
last toast.
toast.
Cheers. Go make an
Cheers,
impact, right?
kids. Go make an
Go
impact.
make an impact. All right. And done.